What is the most unreasonable thing you've been asked to do at work? Story 1. Got asked by my boss to go to the building site next door and ask the builders to stop construction as they were being too loud, not for a specific length of time, just to stop working. I had to ask him what he thought that would actually achieve. Story 2. A while back, there was a carpenter renovating the office next to ours. My boss went next door and yelled at him, "You should do this after hours. Do you like listening to hammering and sawing all day while you're at work?" The carpenter said, "Actually, yes, I do." Story 3. Friend of mine was doing some remodeling on an empty office suite with his two sons, one a finish carpenter and the other an electrician, in order to get it ready for the next tenant. So, noise, some mess, some inconvenience for the others who leased space in the office building on that floor. Douche across the hall complains. The same thing. They should be working at night. He couldn't get anything done with all the noise, and they were making a mess. He was pissed and was going to call the leasing agent to complain. My buddy tells the guy to call the building owner instead, as the leasing agent would just blow him off. Larry says, "Here, I have his card and number right here." Mr. Business Guy dials the number and Larry's cell phone rings. The guy looks at Larry all puzzled. Larry tells him, "I own this building, bud." Story 4. I was asked to lay off a group of employees for another manager. She begged me to do it, and I initially refused. This manager selected and approved the list of people being let go, and was 100% responsible for even needing a layoff. She overhired in her area because she misrepresented her projected needs and let her group's performance fall below standard. No one wants to be part of a layoff on the receiving or giving side unless you're a total sadist. And I really believe if you are laying your people off, you need to have the balls to do it yourself. Period. I wound up doing it because everyone in the building already figured out something was happening based on her behavior, and it seemed excessively cruel to postpone things since everyone was on edge. I felt like the angel of that day. People couldn't even make eye contact with me as I walked the halls, because if I stopped at someone's desk, they knew they were losing their job. My people were terrified, and I still feel terrible about how that day went down because I couldn't say anything until it was done. Layoffs are horrible, and this manager hiding from their responsibility made it even worse. Fortunately, my boss agreed, and he fired her for it. Story 5. Back when I was the manager of a movie theater, I had just gotten done working for 14 hours because someone called in sick and tried to submit payroll to accounting. The fax wouldn't go through. Asked the accountant to go to the office about 2 blocks from her home and see if she could fix it. She said she was too tired and that I should instead drive the 50 miles to hand deliver it. I ended up doing it because if I didn't, then my staff wouldn't get paid. But there were about 8 nasty emails I sent afterward to various higher-ups. A few weeks later, I quit that job to become a busboy. Single best career move I've ever made. Story 6. Not as horrifying as some of the others, but in the early 90s, I worked at a well-known U.S. depot for office supplies. One time, for various reasons I never understood, an edict came down that a certain class of inventory was to be destroyed and discarded. That meant that perfectly good merchandise, including office furniture, lamps, computers, printers, copiers, fax machines, and some other random bits, was to be taken out back and literally smashed to pieces with a hammer, then thrown in the bin. The most amazing part was that under no circumstances was this stuff allowed to be given away, sold, or otherwise allowed to survive and benefit anyone. Several employees begged and pleaded to be allowed to buy some of the things, but nope. Better to destroy it and get nothing in return. It wasn't a huge number of items, but it was easily $10,000 worth of stuff. Story 7. We used to have to destroy hundreds and hundreds of books at my job, and we weren't allowed to do anything with them but put them in the recycling bin. This is called stripping a book. Strip because this process involves tearing off the front cover to be sent back to the publisher as proof of destruction, and then the actual book discarded. I felt like my heart was being ripped out when I had to strip my favorite books and throw them away. At one point, my staff recommendation was The Hunger Games, not long after it came out, and at the height of its popularity, I had to strip 300 copies of it because my assistant manager decided we had too many copies, and she was sick of looking at the boxes in the back room, the storage room, where overstock is supposed to be. And this is a book that we literally could not stop selling because it was so popular. The biggest burn of it all, when our computer system saw we had suddenly lost 300 copies from the store, it ordered us 500 more. I warned the assistant manager what would happen, but she said it wouldn't. They used to allow employees to take stripped books, But that ended after I'd only been with the company a couple of years. Whenever we had to strip hundreds of copies of children's books, I'd get so upset since there are so many schools and children who'd love to have these books. The reason we didn't donate is that after a book is stripped and processed out, the book is once again the property of the publisher. For the publishers, it's much easier and more cost-effective to destroy the books than have them returned to them. As for why publishers won't let the bookstores donate the books, well, you'd have to ask them. And bookstores, mine at least, can't sneakily donate the books instead of recycling them because that would be fraud and theft, which could get the bookstore sued or their relationship with the publisher ended. Story 8. Worked at a grocery chain as a courtesy utility clerk. The vendor for 7-Up and Dr. Pepper screwed up stacking their pallets, so they all fell over, creating a nice pile of broken glass, sticky soda, and wet, messy cardboard. Boss made me clean it all up and told me not to leave it even for a second. Got it all cleaned up in about 2 hours. Not bad, save for me nearly getting shanked by some large glass shards on the floor. But where it became unreasonable was the very next day. I got called into the office and written up by the same boss. Why? I had failed to do floor inspections. He expected me to be able to be in 2 places at once. That was fun to contest. Story 9. When I was 18, I worked part-time at UPS and also part-time at Burger King, which was more of a way to eat for free every day than anything else. This was in 2000 or 2001, so the minimum wage was still $4.25, $5.15, and I wasn't making much more than that at BK. I'm working the drive-thru window one night when a visibly intoxicated couple comes into the dining room and orders some food. My manager was working the register, and one other guy was there cooking the food. The drunks ordered a bunch of deep-fried stuff, and we didn't have enough chicken tenders on hold, so the manager told them it was going to be a couple of minutes while the tenders and fries cooked. No problem, they're going to use the restroom. The restrooms were down a hall, and the doors faced each other, so we didn't think anything of it when they went down the hall together. Their order comes up, and they're not back yet, so we bag it up and leave it under the heat lamps while we wait for them. 2 minutes turn into 5, and I'm busy at the drive-thru window, so I half forgot about them. An indeterminate amount of time goes by, probably 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, and my manager asks me if I expedited that order, gave them their food. I tell her no, they never came back for their food after going to the bathroom. She goes into the women's room, doesn't see anyone, then opens the door to the men's room. I heard her dry heave from my station at the window, a good 20 feet or 6 meters away. She came around the wall that separated the dining area from the work area, and it looked like she'd seen a ghost or a dead body. I asked her what was wrong, and she just shook her head, telling me that she would take over the drive-thru window because I had to clean the bathroom. I geared up with elbow-length gloves, goggles, dust mask, and slickers, not knowing what kind of hell was unleashed in that stall. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw in there. It looked like they hooked up a colostomy bag full of mostly liquid and semi-chunky vomit to a paint sprayer and blasted every single surface in there with the poop and puke. The stall was caked. The door handle had poo smeared on it. There was vomit in the sink, next to the sink, in the trash can, next to the trash can, and just everywhere I looked, there was poop, puke, or both. I didn't even make it 3 steps into the room before my gag reflex reminded me that it existed. My eyes were watering, my stomach was doing somersaults, and I was choking back my own barrage of puke when it hit me. Hey, screw this. Nope, not a freaking chance. I choked out through gasps of air. Not a freaking chance in hell I'm cleaning that up. Call hazmat. Half joking, not thinking my manager would actually expect me to clean that up. Boy, was I ever wrong. Hey, if that bathroom isn't clean by the end of your shift, then don't bother coming back. She didn't get to finish the sentence. I'd already thrown my hat and shirt on the floor. Sorry, Jill, but you don't pay me nearly enough for this crap. I can find another crappy minimum wage job tomorrow. Good luck with that debacle in there. And just like the phantom puke poopers, I was gone. Story 10. I used to work in a restaurant that was above a pro shop, golf. Across the street was a ski area, Bear Mountain, California, and the guy that owned the restaurant where I worked also owned the seasonal snack bar / restaurant in the chalet at the bottom of the ski slope. He had a big chest freezer in the chalet where he kept a bunch of meat, and some doofus turned off all the electricity, including that going to the freezer, when the ski slope shut down for the season. My boss didn't discover it for almost 2 months. He told me, I have an unpleasant job for you to do, but you have to do it. When he lifted the lid on the freezer, the shock of how bad it smelled literally made me vomit right there on the floor. I could tell my boss was close to hurling as well, but he'd already been exposed to the horror once already, so he was prepared. He told me to put it all in garbage bags and tote it out to the dumpster, bin bags and wheelie bin for you Brits. He told me that dealing with the smell and the slime was really nothing more than mind over matter. He looked me square in the eye and told me, I don't mind, so it doesn't matter. I was 14 years old and living on my own. I needed that job. I did it. Story 11. Retired medic. I was told to immediately place a freshly delivered newborn back inside the mother. She was delivered in a transport ambulance en route to Weill Cornell and lost it that her baby wasn't born in a hospital and further, not born in a good hospital. The mother told me to hold the baby in with your hand. I explained it wouldn't work and that we were having this child on 3rd Avenue in the middle 50s and she flipped. So she and I had an agreement. I would say the baby was still inside her body till we backed up at the hospital. I guess this satisfied the requirement of being born at a hospital versus next to a dry cleaners on 3rd Avenue. So as far as that kid knows, she was born in the Weill Cornell ER ambulance bay. Story 12. I was making $12 an hour as an office temp at a government office. My boss filled a box full of pepper spray, flares, and flashbangs. She then labeled it toiletries and told me to take it to air cargo and send it off on a passenger flight to one of our sites. I didn't want to go to jail for causing a mid-air accident, so I took the stuff for myself and distributed it to other projects within the same government department. A few weeks went by as they tried to determine what happened to their stuff. Finally, my boss came into my office and said, "This is theft over $1,000. We'll have to get the RCMP, Federal Police, involved." I told her, "You can't do that without implicating yourself in a worse crime. You just forget about the whole matter." A week later, they canceled my contract with the temp agency and hired me directly at $24 an hour, plus benefits. Story 13. It's expected of us to challenge shoplifters at Asda, Walmart. Getting a knife pulled on me to stop a guy with a pork joint or block of cheese? Not my job. Also, when the frozen delivery has been stood untouched in a sweltering warehouse for 4 hours, the ice cream is liquid and the frozen chicken has fully defrosted. Nope, not for me. The deputy manager threw a hissy fit because I said no and she had to do it herself. Aside from the fact I was 5 hours into a 6-hour shift, just about to go on my break after being left alone on my own to run an entire department before she asked me, while she and the supervisors had all had their break and tossed it off for the morning, giving someone food poisoning and leaving myself open to get sued, isn't worth the £6.70-something that we get paid. Story 14. Bartender. On Good Friday at 9 p.m., a lady had the nerve to ask me to tell another customer to quit swearing because it was Good Friday. I told her as nicely as I could that we're all adults and that I simply wouldn't feel okay with telling another paying customer to stop swearing. My boss saw the conversation and me walking away while she had a sour expression on her face. He asked me what that was about, so I told him. He actually had the nerve to tell me that I needed to go tell the guy to watch his mouth. Now keep in mind, my boss was a cool guy, so I could speak openly to him. Not the best bar manager, he was a banker before and got the job because he was the owner's friend and just got tired of banking. So I responded to him like I wish I could have responded to her, which was something along the lines of, if the sanctimonious girl is so freaking worried about swearing on Good Friday, what the hell is she doing in a sports bar drinking? I literally will walk out of this job right now before I impose her will on another customer because of her beliefs. To which he said, "Good point, screw her." Story 15. In the Army, during my mandatory service, I'm Finnish, we had just completed yearly maintenance to our bandwagon. It took like 3 hours to do, and we checked, fixed, and replaced everything that was needed. So we went outside to breathe some fresh air and smoked cigarettes. As I came back, alone, I saw our Sarge inspecting the vehicle. He asked if we got the maintenance done, and I answered that we just had it done. He looks at me, then looks back at our bandwagon and says, "It's 1 p.m. Now you and your group go to eat lunch, and when you come back, you do it again." Needless to say, we just acted like we were doing it the rest of the day. Story 16. A manager asked me to wrap my arm up in a bin bag and stick my hand into a toilet to try and unblock it. I was a waiter, barman, taking food out to customers. Highlighted this to him, and he insisted that I do it. I promptly told him to screw off and mentioned health and safety. He ended up doing it. On a side note, he was fired 2 weeks later for making inappropriate comments to female staff members. He was a dude. Story 17. I was working as a mechanic at a crappy hood repair shop. The bathroom hadn't been cleaned for years. There was poo built up in a ring in the toilet, and dirt all over the walls, sink, and everywhere. It would be cleaner to take a dump outside and rub the excrement all over yourself, seriously. One day, when we were slow, my boss told me to clean the bathroom. I told him no. He told me again. I told him no, again. He kept telling me again for the next few hours, getting angrier each time. I told him he can tell me all he wants, but that wasn't part of my job description, and I wasn't going to do it. I walked by the bathroom later, and the oil change tire guy, who had crazy baby mamas showing up constantly and chained his pit bulls up outside the shop every day, was in there with a pressure washer. Felt bad for him, but was happy that I wouldn't keep getting told to do it. Story 18. I was an Army officer, and at the time, a company commander. Not only was I instructed to assist in the sweeping of a wreck under the rug, but was ordered to appoint as my acting company first sergeant, top sergeant for the company, a man I had relieved of his duty position and assigned to a desk for misconduct with female trainees. I refused and actually got the victim the medical and mental assistance she needed. He was still assigned the post by higher command, and less than 2 weeks later, I lost my command for creating a work environment so hostile I had lost the confidence of the NCOs/sergeant. Still don't regret it, even though it eventually cost me my career. Story 19. When I was about 16, I got hired to do a cleanup on a paint factory that was over 100 years old. They had big-ass Varsol paint thinner tanks on a hill behind the plant that was gravity-fed into the factory and had clogged. The boss wanted us to physically climb down into the tank, which was waist-deep full of Varsol, and remove it all with 5-gallon buckets. This was a while ago back in Newfoundland, and safety gear didn't exist on the island yet. We all refused, and after that spent most of our time smoking dope on the roof. We all got fired a few days later, although some of the other stuff we did there will probably show up as some strange form of cancer at some point in the future. Story 20. My first summer job in high school was at Subway. Typical absurdity with customers, broken AC in one of the stores my boss owned, blah blah, whatever. One day, I came in for the closing shift and saw my boss getting ready to leave, which was not unusual. He frequently worked the opening shift and would stay through lunch, and then spent the rest of the day in and out of both of his stores. I was the first of 3 people coming in for this shift change. I'm catching up with him for a few minutes, and in the course of this conversation, he says, "Hey, there's a bat outside by the dumpsters. Can you guys try to trap it today when you get a few minutes? My wife has a bat house." This is the story of how I found myself with one of my coworkers spending 15 minutes standing by the dumpsters in the middle of the afternoon, half-heartedly trying to scoop a bat that was hanging in a corner into a large Subway cup without touching it. We failed. So then that is the story of how when my boss came back to the store, he disappeared for a bit and came back with a bat in a cup for his wife's bat house. No rabies was acquired by any party. No word on whether the bat was pleased with her relocation. Story 21. I had been offered a job from an old friend that was triple the weekly wage I was earning at a camera store for the same hours, and it didn't require me to serve customers. I handed in my letter of resignation, and the manager looked me dead in the eye and requested I didn't quit, otherwise the owners would be deported. He was 100% serious and maintained eye contact whilst I was trying my best not to laugh at the concept of store owners being deported over a casual employee resigning. Story 22. I was doing some man nannying for this crazy lady last summer. She had hired me to take care of the kids, but it was mainly housework. She was an extreme hypochondriac who obsessively made me wash my hands after I touched any surface, not exaggerating, and would make you wash the bottom of your shoes if you went outside and came back in. She would constantly be on me for not cleaning the kitchen, but I was not allowed in the kitchen at the same time as her, so she would literally be in the kitchen saying, "Why isn't the kitchen clean yet?" I would have to sit on the outside threshold and jump in the second she left, or else she would freak out. Then she would come storming back in, and I would have to jump out and explain why I wasn't working, because you freak out if I'm in the kitchen at the same time. Then, once in the kitchen, I could only use the sponge and gloves on the left side of the sink, and I was only allowed to touch dirty dishes, never ever clean dishes once the dishwasher was done. I once had to wipe every knob in the house with hydrogen peroxide because strangers had done some work and had touched all the knobs. So the moral of the story is, if you ever nanny, get to know or ask around about the mom first. Story 23. I'm in the Navy, and I had to sweep water off of the pier as it was raining.